Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Donington Park for the final race of the opening weekend in the Radical Challenge Championship here for 2019. This is the third race in a triple header weekend here. All of the race meetings this year are triple headers for the Radical Challenge Championship, and we've had two fantastic races already here at Donington. Yesterday, two different winners as well. Dominic Jackson and Jerome de Sadalier, two of the frontrunners from last year's championship race, have both shared the victories. Dominic Jackson won the first race yesterday, which was the first of two 50-minute pit stop races. This is the second of those 50-minute races that's about to get underway. And the second race won by Jerome de Sadalier, well, that was the 20-minute sprint, and he and Dominic Jackson were separated by less than a second at the flag and by less than a second for most of the race. So we're expecting more really close competition again in this race. So 50 minutes the duration. All of the cars have to make a mandatory pit stop at some point during the race. There is a mandatory pit stop window, which we'll get into later, and there is also success penalties to discuss later on as well, because we've had our first feature race, our first endurance race of the year yesterday, and thus for the next one there are success penalties to be served by certain drivers. The top 5 drivers specifically from that race serve extra time in the pit lane in today's second endurance race, but again we'll go into that in more detail a little bit later on. The BMW safety car is leading the field around on their green flag lap. It gives me a chance just to quickly run you down the grid, at least the front runners, and it is a grid that is based on the results of yesterday's second race, the sprint race, that sets the grid for this one. So yesterday's winner, Jerome de Sadalier, is on pole position. He was 3 times a winner in 2018 as well, and in fact he won this equivalent race 12 months ago, the third race at the season opener at Donington Park, so he'll be hoping to try and repeat that again this morning. Alongside him though is his nemesis from last season, and indeed earlier on this weekend, Dominic Jackson. So it's Jerome de Sadalier and Dominic Jackson, the reigning champion, who line up on the front row together. Mark Richards will be on row 2 with impressive newcomer Jack Constable. Jack is not new to racing, but he's new to radical racing. He's done some Ginetta racing in the past and has been very quick indeed, and he's straight on the pace here as well. He's had a pair of 4th place finishes and will be determined to get that first podium of his radical racing career this afternoon. Richards and Constable then row 2. Spencer Bourne and Brian Murphy are on the third row of the grid, ahead of Brian Cordwell. Radical racing veteran these days is Brian, and Peter Tyler alongside, with John Cordwell, also a regular front runner, and Elliot Goodman rounding out the top 10. Just outside the top 10, in 11th place, is a name that one or two of you may recognise. John Hindhoff, world famous motor racing commentator, but pretty handy racing driver himself as well. I was speaking to John in the paddock a little bit earlier on, and he was lamenting the fact that he doesn't get to do anywhere near as much racing as he'd like these days. Didn't race at all last year, which was the first time for quite a few years that was the case, but he's straight back on it here in the Radicals. He's been offered this drive this weekend with Radical. He leapt at the opportunity to take the wheel, and he is 11th on the grid, finished 11th in yesterday's second race, but he was in the top 10 in the first of our endurance races yesterday morning. So John Hindhoff, one to watch, I think, see if he can get another top 10 in this second endurance race of the weekend. Now, it looks like we're getting a second green flag lap here, but the time appears to have started. My timing screen is notifying me that the race has begun, but is beginning behind the safety car. This is presumably something to do with the really cold temperatures that we've got here, the cold track temperatures at least. These cars, of course, all running on slick racing tyres, so they need all the heat they can get in the tyres. A second green flag lap, therefore, is necessary, and so the car's heading on to that second lap now. At the end of this one, I would imagine we will get the 2x2 rolling start. Last year, as I said, the championship won by Dominic Jackson, fairly handsomely in the end, but Steve Burgess gave him a run for his money through most of the season, and Steve was able to rack up numerous race victories in the early part of the year, but it was really Dominic's consistency. Rarely off the podium last year was Dominic Jackson, and he was able to take the championship after at the end of the season. It wasn't helped by the fact that the last couple of races of last year were cancelled due to weather at Silverstone. Maybe that would have given Steve Burgess or even Jerome de Sadalier a chance to challenge Dominic for the title, but that wasn't the case. Steve not here this weekend, but Dominic and Jerome are, and it's no real surprise surprised to see that they are the two who have set the pace in the early going here. Jerome and Dominic will both have success penalties to serve, and interestingly, Dominic Jackson, because he won the endurance race yesterday, has to serve an extra 5 seconds in the pit lane compared with Jerome. So it's 20 seconds extra in the pits that Dominic Jackson in the black number 4 will spend, and the red and white number 5 of Jerome de Sadalier will spend 15 extra seconds. So for Dominic Jackson, well, this is all a bit unnecessary, isn't it? Banging wheels as they come to the green flag. I think we're in for a spicy race here, aren't we, between these two? They're already trading paint before the race even gets underway. Dominic Jackson and Jerome de Sadalier on the front row of the grid. Then we are about to go racing in the third race of the season for the Radical Challenge Championship. 2x2 to the line. The lights go out and away we go. And it's a good start made by Jack Constable, looking the 11 car on the outside line. There is more paint traded between de Sadalier and Dominic Jackson into Redgate corner. But on the inside line, I think the pole sitter de Sadalier will have the lead. Yes, he will. Jackson slots into second position. It looks like it's Constable in third as they round Redgate for the first time and drop down through Hollywood and the daunting crane of curves. And this is really the part of the circuit where you need to have those tyres up to temperature in the early laps. Very easy to lose the rear of these cars on cold tyres through that very high speed sequence of corners. Through the old head, and they go everyone safely through though. So Sadalier has the lead, and the reason I think that Jackson was so anxious to get ahead of him is because he knows that his race time will be essentially 5 seconds longer than de Sadalier, and therefore he needs to try and get in front and pull out that gap. That has not happened for Dominic though, and it is Jerome that leads them out of Coppice for the first time. We're on the shorter of the two layouts of Donington this weekend, the national circuit, not the full Grand Prix circuit. So instead of turning left through the chicane at the end of this straight, they turn right, our left, their right, through the final two corners on the lap. The top two already breaking away slightly from Jack Constable in third position. This is kind of what we saw yesterday in both races. These two really are the class of the field this weekend, but there is nothing to choose between the two of them. So across the line they go then. 0.6 of a second officially is the margin between Jerome de Sadalier, your race leader, Dominic Jackson in second place, Constable is third, and fourth place Brian Murphy from sixth on the grid. So the red number 57 car you can see there really improving, but we have a safety car according to the timing screen. The safety car being scrambled, we know not why. Must be a car that has not come through. In fact, there are two, and there is one of them, and unfortunately that's Mark Richards, who started third on the grid, and he's beached himself in the gravel trap coming out of the Robert chicane onto the pit straight. So Mark Richards is one car that hasn't come through. The other one that's vanished is car number 6, Barry Liversidge, although I wonder whether he no, I do believe he took the start. So Barry Liversidge, who didn't finish yesterday's second race, therefore started from 18th out of 19 cars. In fact, he hasn't been classified in either of the races so far this weekend, Barry Liversidge, and he, unfortunately, is going to make the wrong kind of hat-trick. He's not going to finish this one either, but that's a real shame for Mark Richards, who got a pair of podium places yesterday, third in both races, and the third race of the weekend really not going his way. He would have had to, as a result of his podium, suspend a little bit longer in the pit lane. His pit stop penalty was 10 seconds extra. We won't have to worry about that now, I suppose, but that will be little consolation, I'm sure, to Mark, who was 7th place in the championship last year. He's been around for a few years in Radical racing. One of the great things about Radicals is that you can move up through the ranks from the lower entry levels of racing with Radical right the way up to the top. Many drivers do stay within the Radical family throughout their racing career. And that's why many of these drivers' names will be familiar to those of you who have seen the odd Radical race in the past. These are the SR3 RSXs that make up the Radical Challenge Championship that we're watching now. It's good to see another healthy grid here. The racing is always exciting, helped by the fact that we have this slightly different format over the weekend. 3 races every weekend, 2 of which are always endurance races with a pit stop and 1 sprint race in between. But for this year, they're actually extending the length of the endurance races. They traditionally have been 40-minute races. Now there's an extra 10 minutes in each, 50 minutes, so an extra 20 minutes track time over the weekend, adding to the incentive for the drivers to sign up and race with the championship. More bang for your buck is always a good thing as far as racing drivers are concerned. They spend a decent amount of money to go out there and race, and they want to get as much track time as possible. So yeah, 50-minute races now for the endurance races. The sprint races are still 20 minutes, and they are a completely different kettle of fish, really. And that's where we tend to see very close racing, but the pit stops in these endurance races offer, if anything, more opportunities for positions to change and strategy to come into play. Blue car there is Rod Goodman, who was a non-finisher yesterday in the number 31 car. And Rod Goodman, in fact, another driver who has not finished either race so far today. and we'll be looking to try and just get to the end of this one really in one piece. But we had a couple of early non-finishes in yesterday's first and second races as well, so one or two drivers not having the ideal start to the season, but there's a long way to go. From here we head to Snetterton next time out, then the wonderful Spa-Francorchamps in Belgium, Alton Park in July, Silverstone in August, Brands Hatch in September. It all ends again here at the end of September at Donington Park, so but that time on the Grand Prix circuit, I believe, the full circuit. So the drivers will be looking to try and take what they learn this weekend and apply it to that season finale at the end of the year, and it'll be fascinating to see as the year goes on which of the drivers who maybe are making their first steps into radical racing are actually able to improve their pace and improve their results. By the time we get back here to Donington at the end of the year, we may see a very different look to the field at the very front. So, Sadalier leads the way, Dom Jackson is second place, Jack Constable third, so he may well get that first podium. There is John Hindhoff. Now, John's first lap has not gone to plan. He started in 11th place, and he is currently running 16th, and is the last of the cars still running. So I don't know whether he maybe got caught up in someone else's moment on the first lap, but John Hindhoff, the motor racing commentator and broadcaster, who was looking for that second top 10 result from the weekend. There's still time to do it though, long way to go, and his pace has been improving as the weekend has gone on. His fastest lap in the first race was a 1 minute 8.9, and then, well, he was fairly consistent, a slightly quicker 1 minute 8.906 in the second race. But he said that he's learning the car all the time, and he's doing most of his learning in the races rather than in pre-season testing that many of the other drivers will have done. He hadn't driven the car before earlier on in the week, so a very steep learning curve for John. He's doing well, and he'll be one to watch, I think, trying to make some overtakes and get back towards that top 10. There's the number 28 car coming through. That's Elliot Goodman, who started 10th and is 13th. So quite a few drivers actually from the sort of 4th and 5th rows of the grid have found themselves dropping down the order in the early laps rather than going up it. So maybe there was a bit of a sort out just towards the back end of the top 10 on the opening lap, which has rather shuffled the field. Lights though are out on the BMW safety car, which is good news because it means we are about to go racing once again, and with about 11 minutes before the pit lane window opens. The pit lane window will open after the first 20 minutes of racing, so they'll get another 5 or 6 laps in, and then we will start to see pit stops. But the green flags are back out, we're away in racing, and Dominic Jackson is right on his toes on the restart. He's already applying the pressure to Jerome de Sadalier down at Redgate Corner, but Jerome realises just as they reach the braking zone that Jackson wasn't really close enough to attack, so he doesn't need to continue defending. That was Spencer Bourne in the purple and black car going up the inside of Peter Tyler, and that was for 6th position. Did Bourne make that one stick? Yes, he did, so that's a place gained off the restart for Spencer Bourne, who drops down the hill. There's already a bit of a gap opening up in front of him, though, to Brian Caldwell, who was 5th across the line. In fact, it looks like Peter Tyler may be struggling because he's now coming under pressure from Jason Rishover in the 23 car, who was right underneath that sizable rear wing as they went through the old hairpin and back up the hill towards McLean's. There goes Jack Constable, 3rd place for him. The Ginetta graduate, these cars a little bit quicker, a lot more downforce, completely different driving style required, but for a former karting ace, Jack should be able to get to grips with these cars fairly well. It's not that dissimilar, I'd imagine, from driving a go-kart. You're just going a little bit quicker, but the way that the cars stick to the ground, they have such a low centre of gravity, great acceleration, lightweight, and karting stars do tend to apply themselves to radical racing fairly well. Looks like this time around we're going to get everyone hopefully safely through to the end of the first lap of racing, and look at the way that Jerome de Sadalier in the second half of that lap has pulled away from Dominic Jackson. The gap going out by 9/10 of a second. It was only 2/10 between them at the restart. It is now 1.1, so brilliant opening lap on cold tyres after the restart there for de Sadalier. Nice battle going on here a bit further back. The 23 car is Jason Rishover, and he has got in front of him now the number 14, and that is McLeod. So McLeod's actually just gone through, John McLeod that is, from 14th on the grid. John is now into 8th place, so that white and blue car just made another position up, has really been carving its way through the field. Now, what was the gap between McLeod and Peter Tyler in front? It was just over a second at the start of the lap. Peter Tyler in 7th place, McLeod now up to 8th. It's going to be a gap that we will monitor as we go on. So back onto the exhibition straight, and a few of the stragglers further back enjoying good battles. Oh, what a bit of contact there, I think was that. That was the number 10 car of John Caldwell going up the inside of somebody, and unfortunately John is the one that comes off worse. I thought that might be the case. The car on the inside there often is the one that rotates when there's a bit of contact made, because it's a blind corner, the car goes light over the crest, and unfortunately John Caldwell's morning is not going particularly well. John started 9th on the grid. He'd already lost some positions, and unfortunately lost quite a few more now. Where will he come across the line? Well outside the top 10. And John Caldwell only now breaks the timing, being in 14th place. Going rather quicker though is our race leader, Jerome de Sadalier, who on each lap of the race since the restart has set a new fastest lap. 1:08.0 is his current fastest lap. Now it's actually been Dominic Jackson who's been the quicker of the two so far this weekend in the races. He has set the fastest lap in both races, and on both occasions we were in the low or mid 1:06s. So that shows you how much track temperature has to do with the lap times out there. We're still about a second and a half away from the fastest lap times from yesterday's races. Through Coppice we go once again back onto the exhibition straight, and you can see there that blind right-hander from the vantage point within these very low slung cars. You won't be able to see the apex until you're right on top of it, making that one of the most challenging corners on the circuit, and it leads onto a long straight as well, so it's one of the most important ones to get right, one of the easiest to get wrong. Redgate go the leading two, and while the gap is now coming down, Dom Jackson starting to show the pace that we saw from him yesterday. De Sadalier briefly improved on the fastest lap to a 1:07.7 before Jackson did a 1:07.3 and gets the gap down to 3/4 of a second. So Dominic Jackson, the race 1 winner this weekend, there in the black number 4 car in second place, but starting to eat into the advantage held by the race 2 winner, Jerome de Sadalier, and you really can't see at the moment past those two for the championship battle, can you? So you kind of get the feeling that each and every one of these head-to-head battles that they have are going to prove really important when we get to the end of the year. Through Coppice they come, and I think the gap's coming down again on this, the 9th lap of the race. Just under 37 minutes still to go in the race. So just under 7 minutes before pit stop window opens. And remember, Dominic Jackson in second position does have the longer pit stop to serve out of the two of them. He will be in the pit lane for 5 seconds longer than his rival Jerome de Sadalier. It's a mandatory 45-second stationary for everybody, and then you add the success seconds, even easy for me to say, onto the stationary time. So it's a total stationary time for Jackson of 65 seconds, and for Sadalier it will be just for 60 seconds, but it's another fastest lap trade-off between the two of them. De Sadalier briefly again gets the fastest lap, only to be beaten, this time only by 200ths of a second, by Dominic Jackson behind him. Dominic, of course, is getting the advantage of the slipstream down the straights. That will be helping his lap times, but conversely, he's running in the dirty air through the high-speed corners, and with these high downforce cars, once you get within sort of half a second or so of the car in front, you will start to lose aerodynamic performance through the corners. That may be something that Jackson is now starting to struggle with. What they're both struggling with, though, is Barry Liversidge's number 6 car, which is out there. It's a couple of laps down, but the red car is about to go a lap down, and, well, de Sadalier trying to get every advantage he can here, slipstreaming from the back marking car, then dives up the inside. He gets waved through by Barry, and is Dominic Jackson going to be so fortunate? Yes, he is. He dives from the inside, but runs a bit wide over the curbs in his haste to make that overtake work. Will that cost him a bit of time? I think it will. The gap was 0.73. Well, no, it still comes down by 3/100ths of a second, but on that occasion, neither of them are quite on fastest lap pace. That's the first lap all race long, but we haven't seen the fastest lap improved upon. Nice battle coming across the line a little bit further back there, though, and in fact, we've just had the change for 5th. That's what I think I just saw there. That was Spencer Bourne getting himself ahead of Brian Caldwell. So Spencer Bourne in the black and purple number 8 car is now into the top 5. He has got past Brian Caldwell and is now about 2.7 seconds behind Brian Murphy in front of him. So again, Spencer Bourne really impressing here, although he started 5th and is now back to where he started. So he was another driver that didn't have a great opening lap of the race, but has been able, thankfully, to pick a few more off since we've gone back to racing again. Hopping over the curb at Coppice Corner, back onto the exhibition straight go the leading 2, and it is now, I think, this sort of stalemate situation where Jackson is as close as he can get to de Sadalier before he starts running into the dirty air issues. And Jerome, as long as he doesn't make a mistake, it's not going to be easy for Jackson to get through. Jack Constable is still 3rd, incidentally. He's sort of in no man's land, about 5 seconds behind these two, and nearly 4 seconds ahead of the 57 of Brian Murphy. But the gap I'm watching really is one between Murphy and Bourne, to see whether Spencer Bourne can close in on 4th position. As the leaders head back through Hollywood, down the hill, through the Crater curves. The red and white number 5 of Jerome de Sadalier, the Swiss driver who has been racing in radicals for a few seasons now, yet to win a championship, got his first victory in the SR3s at the opening weekend here at Donington 12 months ago, and went on to win 2 more times over the season. Jackson, there was a 7-time victor on his way to the championship victory, and the key for Jackson was that when he wasn't winning, he was usually on the podium. So that sort of, it's not just consistency that wins the championships, of course winning races helps, but if you can do both, if you can win races and consistently do so, then you're going to be almost impossible to beat. But this weekend, so far, it looks like Jerome Sadler is every bit the match for Dominic Jackson. Across the line we go though, and Dom is a little bit closer this time, isn't he? Yes, that gap's really come down. It's another new fastest lap for this man in second position, and I think he might have been setting up for a move then into Redgate corner. Checking in with a battle further back. Well, no, it is still going to be to Sadler that leads, but he's sideways out of Redgate corner, and this is Dominic Jackson's chance. Carries more momentum down the hill, has to go to the left-hand side of the road though, and we've already seen these two banging wheels on the warm-up lap. We don't want to be doing it again. Oh, they do. There's contact, and onto the grass goes Jerome de Sadler, but Jackson has gone through. That was robust racing, but that was really, really brave stuff through the crane of curves, and it is now Dominic Jackson, who won yesterday's feature race, that is out in front. There is clearly a bit of needle between these two drivers for whatever reason, but it's making for very entertaining racing indeed, and that all came because Dominic Jackson forced Jerome de Sadler to defend into Redgate corner, and whilst he successfully did so on the way into the turn, on the exit, he ran wide, got on the curb, got on the grass, got sideways, and that was enough. That loss of momentum was enough for Dominic Jackson, who did not need a second invitation, drove straight alongside and then forced his way through down the crane of curves, and in the end one of them had to give, and sensibly I think Jerome de Sadler was the one that did give way, because Jerome knows that the pit stops are coming in the next couple of minutes, 2 minutes time before the pit lane window opens, and once these two make their pit stops, it should at the moment still be de Sadler that ends up in front because of that 5 second shorter stop. The challenge now for Jackson is to try and build a 5 second margin before he pits, so I would imagine that Dominic will be one of the last cars to make its way into the pit lane, so as to maximise the clean air that he's got now and try to stay in front of Jerome during the pit stop window. It will be a 10-minute pit stop window, so they don't have to pit straight away. They can't leave it any later than that, because then they will be handed penalties for missing the pit stop window, so they've got to time it right. What's going on a bit further back, that was briefly the Brady car we saw there of Peter Tyler. This is 57 machine of Brian Murphy, who's still fourth and is not actually being caught by Spencer Bourne that quickly. I thought that Spencer might have a pace to close in on Brian, but actually their lap times are comparable, and there's still 3.5 seconds between the 4th and 5th place cars. Brian Caldwell's still 6th. And that is John Caldwell, who I think has had another rotation down at the old hairpin. Whether that one was the result of some contact or not, I don't know, but not turning into a particularly enjoyable morning for either of the Caldwells really, because Brian Caldwell in the 66 car is down in 6th position and being caught slightly by Alex McLeod behind him, so neither of the Caldwells having quite the performances that we've seen them have in the past. Leading two though back through the old hairpin, accelerate their way up the hill, and I have to say I'm impressed here with Jerome de Sadler's pace. He may have lost that position a lap or so ago to Jackson, but he's staying with him. He's only 0.6 of a second behind, so as things stand, as long as the pit stops go to plan, it should still be Jerome that has the lead. Dominic Jackson needs to try and find a little bit more pace. Black and white warning flag going out for car number 29 incidentally. That is one of the Maratteottos, that's Marcello Maratteotto, who started 16th and is now into 10th position, but he's perhaps done so by exceeding the track limits once or twice too often for the clerk of the course is like. If he does it again, now he's been warned, he will start having time added on to his race time. 5 seconds at first, then 10, then 15, and eventually if you keep it, you can be disqualified from the race altogether. Very rare that that happens, but track limits, time penalties are a little more common. The lead gap creeps up to 8.5 tenths of a second, but that's more than enough at the moment for Jerome. Just needs to keep that black car in sight and off into the barriers, and this could change everything. Goes Spencer Bourne. Spencer Bourne, who we documented his charge up the order after a bad start, but he's lost it coming out of the chicane and has whacked the tyre wall coming onto the pit straight. The car is now sat at an awkward angle on the tarmac, and I reckon that might require a safety car just as the pit lane window opens. Now, if the safety car is scrambled, as I suggested, that might change everything, because everybody will dive in, and the pit lane will become a very, very busy place. And we may well see a few people reacting to the possibility of a safety car, because that car still has not moved. And Peter Shearer there, the motorsport journalist, getting a good view of the action down at the chicane. But are we going to see that dreaded safety car appear on the circuit? The race leader, Dominic Jackson, really hopes not, but it will. It's going to come out now. Do either of the leaders dive into the pit lane? Yes, in comes Jackson, but de Sadeleer doesn't. And that was a mistake, I think, for Jerome de Sadeleer. Dominic Jackson reacting beautifully to the safety car. He will come into the pit lane, serve his... well, the total time will be 80 seconds from pit in to pit out, come back out and then be allowed to cruise straight back up to the back of the safety car queue, at the head of which will be Jerome de Sadeleer. Well, it's not, because the safety car's picked up a back marker, but Jerome de Sadeleer, the race leader, is the third car in the queue, and he will be stuck at safety car speed. It essentially gives Dominic Jackson and anybody else who pits now a free pit stop, and quite a few others are doing so. Jack Constable is in, so too is Brian Murphy. We've got Brian Cordwell in, Peter Tyler, both of the Goodmans, who were running 10th and 11th respectively. Elliot Goodman ahead of Rod Goodman. They're both in as well, so quite a lot of drivers, about half the field, are reacting to the safety car and coming in now. And I wonder whether this might turn out to be a mistake for Jerome de Sadeleer, because even though he has that 5 seconds shorter pit stop than Dominic Jackson, I think he's going to lose a lot more than 5 seconds trawling around behind the pace car. Well, there's John Hindhoff, who was not that far away from going a lap down, and he's unfortunately been picked up by the safety car, even though he's not the race leader. This can sometimes happen, and usually they will wave through the cars that are in front of the leader in the safety car queue. So should be that John Hindhoff, I think it's John Cordwell possibly in front of him. No, it can't be Caldwell. Caldwell's car is black, isn't it? But whoever it is in front of John Hindhoff should be waved through fairly shortly. There goes Dominic Jackson. Now Jackson, you see, he's out of on the circuit. He still had to serve the 80-second pit stop, 65 seconds stationary plus the roughly 15 seconds to get from pit in to the pit box and then from the box back to the pit exit. But look, he's able to go significantly quicker, not full race speed because the circuit is neutralised under yellow flags, but he's able to go significantly quicker. He'll catch the back of the queue, and as long as he gets there before the Sadeleer pit, which surely must happen this time, then he's going to almost certainly find himself back in the race lead. Right, the race leader is in now, I can see on my timing screen, so Jerome Sadeleer is leading a queue of cars past my commentary position into the pit lane. There's Jack Constable. Now, crucially, Constable, I think, got out in front of Dominic Jackson. We've been that preoccupied with the Jackson versus de Sadeleer battle that I've sort of forgotten the fact that Jack Constable could find himself in the race lead here, because he had no, he did have success penalty, but it was a fairly short pit stop that Jack had to serve, just an extra 5-second penalty for him. And so he's been able to leap past everybody potentially. It will all sort itself out in the course of the next 20 seconds or so. Once those that have already pitted come through and those that are pitting now re-emerge from the pit lane, we will have an idea of the order. There are a couple that have not pitted. Number 35 has not pitted, that's Grant Dalton, but there in the pit lane, that's John Cordwell. We can see the red and white car, number 5, just in the background. That is Jerome de Sadeleer, and I'm fairly certain, yes, Jack Constable and, well, everybody else have already long gone. So I think that Jerome will be kicking himself there, or the team maybe as well, for just not getting the message out quickly enough. There's John Hindhoff heading back out onto the circuit. He's followed closely by John McLeod. That will not be a fight for position, though, I don't think, because John McLeod in the 14 car, yes, was on the lead lap, and John Hindhoff was essentially a lap down. He hadn't quite been overtaken by the leader, but that was imminent before the safety car came out. There is the number 4 car, Dominic Jackson, and I reckon that once this all sorts out, it will be the car in front of him, the sort of day-glow orange and white number 11 car of Jack Constable, in only his 3rd ever Radical race, who could be the race leader, because the 35 car at the head of the queue, that is the car that I said hadn't pitted yet. That's Grant Dalton, so he will have to give way very shortly. Number 6 behind him is Barry Liversidge, who likewise has not pitted. When they do so, they'll give up the top 2 positions and hand them to Jack Constable and Dominic Jackson, and that might be about to happen now. They have to weave their way past the stricken car of Spencer Bourne, and then they do indeed dive to their left, and Jack Constable assumes the race lead. Now, he was very close to the podium positions in yesterday's races on both occasions, so really that was his target coming into this race. But knowing Jack, I'm sure that he wasn't just targeting a podium, and given the opportunity to potentially now fight it out for a race victory against the reigning champion, no less, Dominic Jackson, that is an opportunity that Jack will relish, I'm sure. And Constable will have to nail the safety car restart, I'm sure, but will he be able to keep Dominic Jackson at bay? Well, Constable's fastest lap in the race so far, personal best lap, is a 1 minute 7.7, which is it's 1.1 seconds slower than Dominic Jackson has been. So in theory, Jackson is significantly the quicker of the two, as you would expect with his experience and success in the past in this category. But track position counts for quite a lot, and that is the big advantage that Jack Constable may have. He has the race lead, he has the track position. It's going to be difficult, I think, for Dominic Jackson to wrestle that away from him. Now there is the number 5 of Jerome de Sadelier, and I think they've all done a lap now behind the safety car, so the order I've got on my timing screen should be correct, in which case de Sadelier is 13th at the moment. Now I'll give it another lap just to absolutely make sure that the timing screen has sorted itself out after the pit stops, but if that is correct, not only is that, of course, going to end Jerome's chances of fighting for the victory, presumably, but that's not going to help his championship points haul either from the opening weekend. He and Dominic sharing the victories so far, albeit Jerome's sprint race victory worth slightly less points than a feature race victory that Dominic Jackson had yesterday. Now, Jerome de Sadelier possibly outside of the top 10. Either way, the stricken car of Spencer Bourne has been recovered by the hard-working British Marshals, and we are about to go racing once again with Jack Constable and Dominic Jackson set to fight for the race lead. In third place, the red car in the background, that's Brian Murphy, and in fourth position, Brian Cordwell, so he's also benefited from all of this. Off goes the race leader though, and Jack Constable floors the throttle, accelerates across the start-finish line and tries desperately to defend the race lead for another 22.5 minutes, but Dominic Jackson already is weaving around in his wing mirrors. It's side by side for third place, Brian Murphy defending from Brian Cordwell. The two Brians together, and Cordwell with a much better exit by virtue of the wider sweeping line that he took into the turn. Can he draw alongside through Hollywood? No, he can't, so it will still be Brian Murphy ahead of Brian Cordwell, and then the two Goodmans are next. Number 28 Elliot Goodman ahead of number 31 Rod Goodman. They are 5th and 6th, with Peter Tyler 7th. 8th place for number 14, which is John McLeod. 9th position for Jason Wishover, and John Cordwell rounding out the top 10. Jerome de Sadelier is indeed 13th and 10.7 seconds off the race lead, but of course there's a lot of overtaking to be done before he can even consider fighting for a podium position. Definitely fighting for a podium position though are these two. They're fighting for the race lead. Jack Constable holding on for the time being. Dominic Jackson maybe just minding his P's and Q's here, just slowly building up the tyre temperatures and pressures rather than throwing a big attack at Jack Constable straight away and taking unnecessary risks. Dominic will feel that he's quick enough to just bide his time here. He doesn't want to wait too long. If we get another safety car, that could hurt his chances, of course, so he wants to get on with this if he can, and this could be his opportunity because Jack Constable's defending the inside line. Dominic Jackson tried to get to the inside, there was no way through, so he goes for the wide line in, the tight line out. This is what he tried to do to the race leader de Sadelier earlier on, but that opportunity is also not afforded him as Jack Constable gets over to the right-hand side of the road again and chops the nose off of the reigning champion's black number 4 car, but it almost seems inevitable here, doesn't it? It's a case of when, not if, I think Dominic Jackson gets through. He just needs to do it cleanly. He will know, presumably, that his big championship threat for the year, Jerome de Sadelier, is outside of the top 10. Doesn't need to take any big risks here. Through McLean's they go. Again, it will be a defensive line taken by Constable at Coppice Corner. Of course, this is bringing Brian Murphy into play as well, which is the last thing that Dominic Jackson needs to see in his mirrors. It is now definitely 3 cars for the race lead, and still Jack Constable holding on, ducking out of line there. The black car in second place, Dominic Jackson, but he's now having to defend more than he's attacking because Brian Murphy's going to the outside of him, down towards the chicane, and up the inside. Oh, there was almost a chance for Dominic Jackson. He's all over the curbs. He'll be slow off the chicane. This is the worry for Dominic. He doesn't need to get caught up in any contact, but at the same time, every corner that he spends stuck behind Jack Constable is backing him into the pack behind, and if I'm going to see a change behind him for third place, that's a lovely move by Brian Cordwell. Up the inside of Brian Murphy. Murphy fights back on the exit though. This will take the pressure off of Dominic Jackson for a few corners. I think Murphy's going back through. Yes, he did. That was just a bit too late on the brakes for Brian Cordwell, but a nice attempt at the move and trying to take advantage of the disrupted rhythm and the disrupted pace of the cars in front. This is turning into a bit of a pressure cooker race, isn't it? They're all getting closer and closer and closer, the tension building and building and building, and eventually you feel that something will have to give. The question is what? Will it be a mistake from Constable? Will Dominic Jackson go for a move that doesn't work? Well, maybe both of them end up off the road and hand the race lead over to one of the Bryans behind. We'll find out, I suppose, over the next 19.5 minutes. We've still got, remarkably, just under half of the race still to go. And what a race it's turned into, and off the road goes! Oh, Brian Cordwell Through the Coppice gravel trap he goes, he throws away 4th position and will rejoin somewhere towards the back of the top 10, I think. That's a shame for Ryan Caldwell, who was just starting to make noises at the sharp end of the field, looking for his first podium of the season. Ryan was, where did he finish yesterday's races? 9th and 7th respectively. He's going to be back down in that sort of position again now. Meanwhile, side by side for the race leader, right round the outside goes Dominic Jackson. What a move that was. Jack Constable was braking significantly earlier than Dominic into Redgate on the previous laps. Dominic saw that, realised the inside was always going to be defended and thought, well, okay, I'll use all of this clean air on the outside and drive right around you. So through goes Dominic Jackson. He leads the way. Jack Constable now unlikely perhaps to be able to stay with him, but we'll wait and see. Get a bit of free tuition here in a way by following the experienced Jackson around, see if he can pick up exactly where Dominic is taking the time out of him. But really, I think for Jack now, the main goal has to be trying to hang on to a top 3 finish. Oh, a back marker there, though, rather getting in the way of Dominic Jackson. Not intentionally, I'm sure. It was just taking its normal line through Coppice. And the quicker drivers always do say to the back markers that they should try and stick to the racing line. And look at this, Jack Constable taking full advantage of this to come back at Dominic Jackson down the straight. It is the number 10 car of John Caldwell, who's had a generally problematic race, and he rather impeded the progress of Dominic Jackson through Coppice, and that little gap that Dominic had been building has now evaporated, and still he has not found a way past John Caldwell. Now he goes to the inside at Redgate, through he will go, and Constable should be able to go through on the exit as well. Left absolutely no room for error there. He has gone through. That was a worrying moment there for Dominic Jackson. It just goes to show, though, in these longer races where there will be a little bit of lappery to be dealt with by the leaders, anything can still happen regardless of how deep into the race we are. Now, there is Jerome de Sadelier, early race leader. He's into 11th place now, or he was at the start of the lap. Yes, that's still where he is, because it's the 24 car directly in front of him that he's tried to get past. That is Peter Brooks, who started 13th on the grid. So Peter Brooks, if Sadler can get past him, he will be in 10th position, which will score him 28 points, as opposed to 80 points for a race victory, which potentially was going to Dominic Jackson. It goes to show how you really can't afford to have a bad race, particularly in one of these longer feature races. You can score 80 points for a victory in the feature races, double that of the sprint races where you only score 40. So these are the ones that you want to win. Here comes a challenge from the number 5 car of Jerome de Sadelier, goes to the outside of number 28, that is, down at Redgate Corner. So actually, de Sadelier, yes, he's now into the top 10. 28 was Elliot Goodman, who was running in 4th position, was he not? So Goodman possibly slipping down the order slightly, but de Sadelier not. He is going the right direction now. He's starting to pick them off one by one. There's the number 14 machine as well, coming through of John McLeod. And John McLeod in 5th place. Here they go, they're about to negotiate the John Caldwell car, or they're going to try to anyway at McLean's, but John is not keen on leaping out of people's way, is he? But the point I was about to make before is that the quicker drivers always say that the cars being lapped should stick to the racing line, because at least then they know where they're going. If they start suddenly veering offline, I know they think they're being helpful by getting out of the way, but the drivers behind have absolutely no idea what they're about to do. So in a way, John Caldwell's doing exactly the right thing. However, he is definitely holding up some of the quicker cars as they try and come through. It's a balancing act, isn't it? You don't want to be ducking and diving all over the road, just sort of waving the white flag and rolling over too much. But at the same time, you do need to get out of the way eventually. So we'll see what happens with this little gaggle of cars that comes through. Now to Redgate they go. The blue number 31 car there of Ron Goodman, coming or trying to apply the pressure. He's looking for 5th place, trying to get it away from the 14 of John McLeod. These are all drivers that have worked their way nicely up the order and taken good advantage of pitting that one lap earlier. And that's gained them a lot of track time, track position, I should say. And their end result may well benefit from it. Through Starkeys, Schwann's curve, the next left-hand kink for hitting the brakes into McLean's, but probably not that hard in these cars. You'll be able to carry good speed through the corner. Back up the hill again, keep on climbing right the way towards Coppice Corner. The blue and yellow car at the back of the group, that's Jason Rishover in the number 23 car. He's just got past Peter Tyler on the previous lap, so he's into 7th place now. Peter Tyler down to 8th, Brian Caldwell 9th, and Jerome de Sadelier in 10th. Now this is why I was getting confused. I thought Sadelier was further up the queue than the timing screen was telling me. He looks like he's about 4th or 5th on the road, but has received a 10-second time penalty. I know not why, but he has received a 10-second time penalty and will drop down So he's further down the order than he looks, basically, as the number 5 car, and I don't know whether that's a pit stop infringement or a driving standards infringement, but for some reason, Jerome de Sadelier, whose race is rather unravelling now, has been given a 10-second time penalty, dropping him into 10th place on amended times, even though he's further up the queue than that on the track. So we'll monitor his times with interest now to see just how much he can salvage from this, but it really is turning into a day to forget for Jerome de Sadelier. Winner here of this race 12 months ago. It doesn't look like he's going to repeat that here in 2019. His queue of cars, though, is starting to get very tasty indeed. We've got Peter Tyler starting to close in as well, and the recovering Brian Cordwell was the white and red car next in the queue. Then it's number 73, John Hindhoff, who comes through. John is now 13th position, and I think still on the lead lap. No, I think he may well have gone a lap down now, hasn't he, John Hindhoff? There's the 24 of Peter Brooks, and he is in 11th position. There's John working his way down the straight, enjoying himself, I'm sure. Now, what was his lap times like? He did a 1 minute 9.36 yesterday, did John Hindhoff. His fastest lap today, 1 minute 9.1, so he's already gained a couple of tenths compared with his pace from both races yesterday. That will be exactly what he was hoping to achieve today. I think John just looking to try and enjoy himself, of course, that's the primary objective, but also to get quicker. And like all competitive racing drivers, getting quicker means that it will increase his enjoyment as well. So John heads down the hill, through the old hairpin, back up the hill again, and that number 73 car in beautiful isolation at the moment on the circuit. No one else to trouble him, so he can just focus on his lap times and try to keep bringing them down. They even get into the 1 minute 8 second bracket before the end of the race. This group of cars, they're still very close together. There's Dominic Jackson, your race leader. His lead gap is now 2.6 seconds, or it was a lap ago at least, to Jack Constable in second, who was about 3.5 seconds ahead of Brian Murphy. And then Elliot Goodman into 4th position now. But is Elliot, he's behind Jerome de Sadelier on the road. Jerome is now 3rd on the track, but on corrected times is now dropping down by timing screen. Where does he settle in? Still 10th place, and actually needs to find another 4.7 seconds before he gains a position. But then he will start picking off the cars that are in that big queue fighting over what is now actually 4th position, led by Elliot Goodman. You've got Elliot Goodman, you've got Alex McLeod, Rod Goodman, Jason Rishover, Peter Tyler, Brian Cordwell. They're all nose to tail on the track and are about 7 seconds or so behind Jerome de Sadelier. Well, once Jerome builds that gap up to 10 seconds, he will actually start overtaking him, if you see what I mean, on corrected times, and he should be able to pick quite a few of those off. So top 5 is still on the cards here for Jerome de Sadelier, but even if he gets 5th position, that's still only 48 points. It's nearly half the amount of points that this man, Dominic Jackson, may be about to score in 11 minutes and 20 seconds, because Dominic is continuing to extend his lead now by nearly a second a lap over Jack Constable. Crosses the start-finish line. Winner from the first of the feature races yesterday. Looks like he might be the winner of the second as well. It's well and good Jerome de Sadelier winning the sprint race, but as we make the point, that is not worth as many points. It's worth half the points of these feature races. It's the winners of the feature races that at the end of the season we're more than likely going to be seeing fighting for the championship. There's Brian Cordwell. He's fighting to try and make ground back up after his gravelly moment at Coppice earlier on. Peter Tyler is the black and yellow car in front of him. And the old hairpin is a potential overtaking opportunity, and he has a big look actually, and fair enough there to Peter Tyler. He saw Brian Cordwell coming, left him space, but Brian had backed out by that point anyway, so still in position to stay as they are. And John Cordwell right behind Brian Cordwell now, who dives up the inside. Through he goes. John Cordwell also outbrakes himself a little bit behind, so he's not able to take advantage of that. But Brian Cordwell now goes into 8th position at the expense of Peter Tyler, and is about a second and a half behind Jason Rishover now. So that's probably more than that now with that overtake. It's the gap that you can see there between the 2 blue cars and the white and red car. That's the gap between the 7th place battle and the new 9th place man, Brian Cordwell. 8th place man, I should say, Brian Cordwell. Across the line he goes. Already getting away slightly now from Peter Tyler. Peter, in yesterday's races, didn't finish the first one and then was 8th in race 2. He's not now in the top 10 anymore, though, is Peter. Or he's just in the top 10. He's in 10th place, but he has now been overtaken on corrected times by Jerome de Sadelier. So de Sadelier is basically between these 2 cars on corrected times. He's just ahead of Peter Tyler, and he's just behind the white and red car of of Brian Cordwell, and by the end of this lap I'd imagine he will have leapfrogged Cordwell as well. So he is gaining time back here quite handily, is Jerome, and in fact Jerome is the quickest man on the track, so he should be gaining time. He, on the previous lap, was 3/10 quicker than the race leader. Not that that's going to do him much good really, although on the track I suppose he may have a chance of catching Jack Constable and Dom Jackson, but record times that's far less likely. So out of Coppice they go again. Jackson completes his 32nd lap meanwhile, and is now, oh in fact Sadalier is now the second place car on the track. He's got past Jack Constable, 19 seconds behind the race leader on corrected times. Where does Sadalier drop in now? Is he leapfrog past Brian Cordwell? I think he might have done. That would put the Sadalier 8. Yes, he has. So drove the Sadalier now into 8th place, and within another lap should start making his way into the top 6. So drove the Sadalier, we're not seeing much of him, but that's because he's not actually doing that much overtaking. He's just putting in qualifying lap after qualifying lap to try and salvage something from this race. There is the third place man, Brian Murphy, who is some 3.9 seconds behind Jack Constable and 2.1 seconds ahead of Elliot Goodman. But Elliot on the previous lap set a personal best lap and was about 7/10 quicker than this man, Brian Murphy, so we could yet have a fight for the bottom step of the podium. Whether it ends up being for the bottom step of the podium, I don't know. That all depends on the progress de Sadalier can make, and it's all going on behind Elliot Goodman. Look, that's the McLeod and Rishover battle, is it coming through? And I think we may have just had a change there. John McLeod, I think, has he got past? No, he hasn't. Has he? Oh, yes, he has, because he's now behind Elliot Goodman. So I think we have had some shuffling just towards the back end of the top 5. Time screen will tell us all when we come through this time. Brian Murphy will come home, will come across the line to start the 33rd lap of the race. In 3rd place now, just 1.4 seconds ahead of Elliot Goodman, who is 0.8 of a seconds ahead of McLeod. So John McLeod in the 14 car. 35 is Grant Dalton. He's going another lap down. The red car there, just being overtaken by number 31, the blue machine of Rod Goodman. Rod Goodman in 7th place at the moment. So both of the Goodmans having a pretty good race here, aren't they? Should both stay in the top 10, barring any late race disasters. John Hindhoff has got the number 6 car of Barry Liversidge behind him. Now they are on different laps. Hindhoff is a lap ahead of Liversidge at the moment. John not improving his personal best pace since we last mentioned it. He's 15.6 seconds behind John Cordwell, not moving quite as quickly. So Hindhoff, unless anyone else starts to fall off the road, should come home in 13th. But it's been a clean race for John, and that's the main thing. We've seen a bit of aggression out there from some others, but for John, laid back as ever, is just keeping it clean, sticking to his lines, and he's at least got Barry Liversidge to play with on the circuit now, even though it's not for position. But Barry, whose fastest lap is also 1:09.1, so these two are actually very comparable on pace. I'm sure they'll enjoy a private little battle out on the circuit. Peter Brooks is the 24 car in front of them, and he is a lap ahead of John Cordwell, and therefore 2 laps ahead of Barry Liversidge. So none of these cars fighting for position, but when you find yourself out on circuit running around with someone of a comparable pace to you, you may as well have a little race with them. And I think that's what these two are going to do for the last 6 minutes of this 3rd and final race of the weekend at Donington Park. So race leader Dom Jackson has gone on to his 34th lap of the race, 8.5 seconds ahead of Jack Constable. What of Jerome de Sadalier, I hear you ask? Well, he's now 7th place on corrected times and should be 6th ahead of Jason Rishover at the end of this lap. So I think he should make the top 5, and if he can make the top 5, he should be able to make the top 4, because Elliot Goodman in 4th is only 0.8 of a second ahead of John McLeod in 5th. So top 5 definitely doable here for Jerome de Sadalier. Checking now then with John Cordwell in the number 10 car, and he's behind the number 35, which is Dalton, Grant Dalton. These two again not on the same lap, but John Cordwell should be able to make this move stick fairly easily down the pit straight. He's got his nose in front on the outside line. Sensibly, Grant Dalton not going to fight it too much, so an overtake on the circuit, it was not for position, it was just another lap being put on the 35 car. Down the Craig curves. I don't think John Cordwell's likely to catch anybody else, as you know. I think he's actually a lap behind the next man in the queue, which is Peter Brooks in 11th position. 12.9 seconds ahead of John Hindhoff now. John was actually a couple of seconds quicker than him last time, so John Cordwell having a bit of an inconsistent race, isn't he, this morning. He's had those couple of moments. We didn't see whether he spun at the old hairpin, but he certainly was going slowly at one point, as if he had just recovered from his second spin of the race. Brian Caldwell's been through the gravel at Coppice as well, hasn't he? So neither of Caldwell's delivering on the pace that we know that they both have. Just a few too many mistakes creeping in. Back with the Rod Goodman car, as he still has not found a way past Jason Rishover. They're only half a second apart, and they have been for several laps now. Rod, in fact, just did a personal best lap, 107.9. And Rod Goodman in 8th position now, because they've both been overtaken by De Sandalia, who is a second now on corrected tyres behind John McLeod. So 4th place should be Dromes before the end of the next lap. There is McLeod going, there was McLeod, I should say, going through Starkeys, back with John Hindhoff, who is heading through Redgate Corner, 3 minutes and 40 seconds away from the end of his first weekend of radical racing. But John, as well as being an experienced commentator, has raced in Genettas before. He's done some endurance racing, 24-hour racing over in America as well. He was saying to me earlier on he'd love to have a go at one of these things in America. There is an American radical championship, of course, which John, I'm sure, has his eye on, and were he to be invited, he would snap up the opportunity very quickly, I'm sure, as long as his numerous work commitments, commentary-wise, allowed. Down the chicane goes the 31 of Rod Goodman. I thought for a moment he might have got past Jason Rishover, because couldn't see Jason in the shot, but he is still there. He's the blue and white car with the yellow highlights, and on that occasion Rishover was actually a tenth or so quicker than Rod Goodman, so they're trading times. But this is, again, I think a product of this dirty air that we talk about, where chasing car has reduced aerodynamic efficiency through corners. The car just doesn't stick to the road as well at either the front or the rear end. And at such a high speed circuit as this one at Donington, that will really, really hurt your lap times and hurt your ability, therefore, to get close enough to actually overtake. See on the timing tower on the left-hand side of the screen, Jerome De Sandalia is now in 5th place. He's found a way, well, not found a way past me, he's overtaken John McLeod on corrected times. There is De Sandalia, and how much time does he have to gain to get past Elliot Goodman? Well, it was only half a second, so I think he might be able to do that. Let's see. De Sandalia comes across the line, second on the road, about 9 seconds behind this man, Dominic Jackson. They've been trading lap times, really. But is De Sandalia now into 4th position? He may even be into 3rd on corrected times, actually, ahead of Brian Murphy. No, he's 4th. He's 2/10 of a second behind Brian Murphy, so he should have that position before the end of the lap, then would have to find a further 7.2 seconds to overhaul Jack Constable, who is still running around in 2nd place. We haven't seen much of Jack for a while, but Jack Constable, 11.6 seconds off the race lead. He will be mighty happy with a 2nd place, though, and a maiden podium. And having led laps, gone toe-to-toe with the reigning champ Dominic Jackson, I think altogether it's been a very, very successful opening weekend for Jack. More podiums will no doubt come his way, but of course with a 2nd place finish here, so too will more time penalties. And so next time out at Snetterton, at least the first of the feature races at Snetterton, first of the 50-minute encounters, Jack will have to serve an even longer pit stop penalty. But as we saw today, that doesn't necessarily hurt you if you get a bit of luck, or if you play the strategy game right, because Dominic Jackson, we said, had to serve the longest pit stop of anybody, and yet here he is in the lead with just 2 laps to go. So you can overcome those success penalties. Just have to play the system to your advantage, and that's what quite a few people did, but most notably Dominic Jackson in this one, to overturn that extra time penalty. There's Jerome De Sandalia. He is now 3rd on corrected times. He's got past Brian Murphy. He's 6.6 seconds behind Jack Constable on the timing screen, and with only 2 laps to go, and given the fact that he's lapping less than a second a lap quicker than Jack, I don't think he's going to do that, as long as Jack keeps it on the island, which I'm sure he will. Last words, of course, I shouldn't have said that, but let's hope Jack Constable hangs on to the flag for this 2nd place. There's De Sandalia, 2nd on the road. Of course, the next car behind him will be the next car in front of him on corrected times. You can see, though, how much closer these two are now, as Jerome De Sandalia has been sort of relentlessly chopping into the advantage held by Dominic Jackson. Had this been a genuine fight for the victory, I'm still not sure he'd have got there, but he's certainly getting close enough to Dominic that Dominic knows he's there, and that will send a message to Dominic, if nothing else, that had the pit stops worked out differently and had Jerome not had the penalty, he's sort of sending the message that I could have still raced you, I could have still beaten you, I could have still won this race. And I think we will see Jerome on the top step of the podium several more times this year. As I said, we head to Snetterton next, which was actually one of the that was Jerome's worst round last year. He had a poor result in race 1 and 2 non-finishes in races 2 and 3. So the only way is up for Jerome, I suppose, in a few weeks' time. It will be on the 11th and 12th of May that we have the 4th, 5th and 6th rounds of the championship. And Jerome Sadalier will be desperate not to repeat the performance from 12 months ago at Snetterton, and he will desperately need to avoid doing that because he needs to try and take some points out of this man, Dominic Jackson, who is looking good now for win number 2 of the weekend, win number 2 of the season, and a fairly healthy championship lead as we head to Snetterton in a few weeks' time. Out of the final chicane comes the race leader, and Dominic Jackson, the 2018 champ, picks up right where he left off with a double race victory here at Donington Park. Jerome de Sadalier second on the road, but I don't think he's going to do enough to depose this man, Jack Constable, from second place on corrected times. What a drive it was from Jack. He has caught many people's attention this weekend, I can guarantee that, and he does indeed get confirmed as the second placed finisher, by just under 5 seconds in the end ahead of Jerome de Sadalier. And in a way, I think Jack is really the driver of the race. Now, this is all getting rather tasty. That's John Hindhoff, who is trying to go on the inside of the number 35 of Grant Dalton to put a lap on him, and in doing so, he's sort of getting backed up into a few of the cars behind. Number 24 is Peter Brooks, who is ahead of both of them. Again, these cars not on the same laps, but they're very much trying to occupy the same bit of real estate. Number 6 is Barry Liversidge behind. He is on the same lap as Dalton, though, so actually the white number 24 car and the red number 6 behind are fighting for position, but I don't think those positions are going to change. Across the line, they will all come. Number 35, Dalton, will finish 40th. John Hindhoff will finish 30th and completes all 3 of his debut races in the championship cleanly. And then the number 24 car of Brooks will be 11th, and Liversidge will be in 15th. So in the end, did not get past Grant Dalton. He was 1.6 seconds back at the flag, and I think that's pretty much everybody across the line. And a really entertaining race. You can see how these pit stop penalties are going to spice things up all year long, and this race was a prime example of that. The victory, though, does go, despite the 20-second pit stop penalty, to Dominic Jackson. Jack Constable with a remarkable second place finish, and Jerome de Sadalier in 3rd. Elliot Goodman was 4th, Brian Murphy 5th, 6th place for John McLeod, 7th Jason Rishover, 8th for Rod Goodman, 9th Peter Tyler, and 10th for Brian Cordwell. 11th went to Peter Brooks, 12th John Cordwell, 13th for John Hindhoff, 14th for Grant Dalton, and 15th for Barry Liversidge. We lost, unfortunately, Marcello Maratteotto. He came into the pit lane midway through the race. We also, of course, lost Spencer Bourne with that crash in the chicane, and on the opening lap, we saw the 3rd place starter, the podium finisher yesterday, double podium finisher yesterday, Mark Richards, in the gravel and out of the race. So that means that yesterday we had the same 3 drivers on the podium in slightly different orders, but the same 3 drivers on the podium in both races: Dominic Jackson, Jerome Sadalier and Mark Richards. Well, today, 2 of them are on the podium. Again, Dom Jackson and Jerome Sadalier, 1st and 3rd respectively, but they are split by the man making his first appearance on the podium, Jack Constable, the first of many, I think, for the former Ginetta star. And from Fleet in Hampshire in the Hart GT car. Could he be a championship contender? Maybe not. You'd have to say he'd probably have to find a bit more pace to compete with Jackson and de Sadalier over the season, but over the season that pace should improve, and I can't wait to see the progress that he makes throughout the year. So a great opening race then here at Donington Park for the Radical Challenge Championship, and as I said, their next round will take place at Snetterton on the 11th and 12th of May. Then they go to Spa in Belgium on the 22nd and 23rd of June. The 20th of July is a busy day for the Radical Championship because they'll be at Alton Park, and it is a one-day meeting, so they will have a qualifying session and 3 races all crammed into one afternoon at Alton Park. And then they go to Silverstone on the 17th and 18th of August, Brands Hatch on the 7th of September, another one-day meeting, and the 28th and 29th of September, as I mentioned earlier on, the season finale here at Donington Park. Will it go down to the wire again? I think it probably will, if nothing else, because there are 200 points available at each weekend, but also because I think it's going to be very close, the battle between de Sadalier and Dominic Jackson. So, an excellent opening race then of the, or final race I should say, of the weekend, an excellent opening weekend of the season for the Radical Challenge Championship here at Donington Park. Well, we saw an awful lot of a certain John Hindhoff during that race. I'm sure he's got plenty of stories to tell after that one, but before we went racing, we actually had a chance to catch up with the Motorsport broadcasting legend and see just how he was feeling about his debut appearance in the championship.
Here we are at Donington Park. What brings you here?
Well, it's been a really interesting last few days thanks to Radical Cars, who are actually near neighbours of mine. I live in Northamptonshire, they're just over the border, invited me to come and have a try of an SR3. Now, I thought that was a really great idea, but I did have to tell them that I've never driven anything that's got downforce like this before. I've in fact never even driven anything that didn't have a roof. I'm a tin top man normally, GT4s, that sort of thing. In fact, I was last out with an Aston Martin on Hankook tyres at the Circuit of the Americas a couple of seasons ago, and I thought it was too good an opportunity to pass up. All my racing driver friends rave about SR3s, and now I know why. Thursday's test session was a baptism, literally, because it poured of rain in the afternoon, and it was a steep learning curve, no doubt. I approached it, I hope, sensibly, not trying to go and set lap records. I've had a couple of spins, I had a couple of little drops, but thankfully, Radical gave me a mentor in Roger, who is outstanding. He's a hard taskmaster. He doesn't like you not doing what he tells you, and that was clearly exactly what I needed, because he's found me time every time I've got in the car. I've gone quicker, and it's been fantastic. When you look at a car like the SR3, you can't help but think, first of all, it looks like a proper racing car. Well, I can tell you now it drives like a proper racing car as well. I've had to completely recalibrate my racing brain, which is not a very big brain, and there's not very much left of it to go racing, to be honest. But I've had to completely recalibrate how I think about Donington Park. The last time I raced here was in a 6-hour race in a Porsche 924. Now, believe it or not, the track hasn't changed since then. You wouldn't believe that, having seen my onboard and how I had to drive. It's like a different circuit. Everything's happening so much quicker. But for someone who doesn't drive enough or often enough, what I've taken out of this is how accessible the performance of the SR3 is. It gives you all of the right feedback. As a gentleman driver, certainly not expecting a phone call anytime soon to be a pro. As a gentleman driver, what you want is a car that you can feel comfortable and confident in. And the SR3 has that in spades. In fact, the harder you drive it and the faster you drive it, the more rewarding it is. And my heart rate's been right up through the roof all the way through this. I'm normally quite calm behind the wheel. I do endurance racing normally. This has been full on, everything happening. Where have I got to be next? What gear am I in? Where should I turn in? You know, Danny Sullivan once said, adrenaline is the drug you can't buy. Well, I can tell you can, and it's Radical SR3. That's adrenaline. Pure adrenaline, proper race car. Analog, no aids, it's brilliant.